of the peer observation and how it's impacting on their teaching. So this is really good practice for all of us. I'm going to move on to some of the specifics of feedback. Now, what came through in quite a few of the feedback was about still facing the challenge of the English language, but more specifically related to specialized terminology and subjects that you use, in law and accounting. So the students seem to have a really struggle with the concepts that we're trying to put over. So this, but then also that what I've highlighted is the speed of reading and writing. So how do we improve the speed of the students' ability to read? So they're reading quite slowly, and this came through. I then surveyed about 50 students whom I teach, or not teach, but mark assignments to find out what are the barriers that they have. But interesting, well, it's not just about the language as a barrier, but the context of the course. So their minds are blank about the UK. They do not understand the context of the English. So they find that quite difficult in answering assignments because they don't understand the context. So what the students are asking is that, can't we give more examples from other countries, examples in the assignments that could be more international, because we have a very international group of students, and maybe we need to think about the context of how we set in the assessments and assignments. So that was quite interesting feedback from them. And I have an example from one of the students that I quote here. So for me, it's his first language is not English and doesn't know the English culture very well. It's been particularly challenging. So it's not just about the English language, it's also trying to understand the English culture, which is quite peculiar. So no insult to the English here, but it's just very different. And I think this is something we need to take into account. So here I have a student from Republic of Moldova. It's very difficult for me to understand the example of the macro environment of this sector because I do not know the specificities of the given industry well enough, and I do not have a knowledge about the political, economic, social, and technological environment of this country. Every time when I try to argue, I find explanations linking to the situation of my own country. But if there any comment on this before we move on, because this is about the context, is it possible for us to give different contexts, or are we bound to the English context? I see some people giving comments. If you can give some, Joe says, more detail what we want them to do. I think that's quite an important part, especially in the assignments. So just coming back to the assessment, students feel that you're not giving them enough time to prepare for the assignment, because I can vouch for this. When I did some observations, I found that the assignment was due that week, but the focus was on getting through the content of the course rather than focus on the assignment. So I'm not sure if it applies to all subjects or some subjects, but I did ask for more time on the to prepare for the assessment. So I don't know if there's any further comment. Nick's really interesting. But I think the culture is a big issue. And that, so if you think about your frames of reference and you want to write something, and then you don't have a frame of reference. The only reference, the frame of reference, is your experience back at home. So how do you write about something in the English context where you know nothing about it? So that's a challenge I put to everyone about how do we manage with this context. especially, I'm not sure how we can do that in law, because English law is English law. Joe, any comments about how you would do that in law? Okay, so Joe's made an interesting comment. I don't know what we think, I don't know what we know. Okay, so that's interesting. So please try and think about the context of the culture and where the frames of reference of the students. Now, this is an area that I'm guilty of. I've been pushing a student-centered approach and trying to encourage people to ask questions, giving feedback in class. So I've been pushing that. But then when I spoke to the students, they don't feel confident to answer questions in English. So there are two things that came up here. They don't understand what you're telling them. They don't understand your accent. So I'm not sure if you're aware that they don't understand your accent, because they're too shy to tell you that they don't understand what you're saying. So if you take, for example, Chris with his very Scottish accent, I sometimes wonder if the students understand what he's actually telling them. But they will never embarrass you and say, we don't understand you. But they have conveyed that to me, that they don't understand what the lecturer is saying because the accent is they can't work it out. So that's why they don't like you asking questions in class. Firstly, about they don't understand your accent, and the second thing, they're not sure what the question is about. So I think this is something we need to think about. Some lecturers, they say, speak very softly, so they don't understand what they're saying because their voice is so soft, so they can't about that. So I think the students' reluctance to say what they on their minds is a challenge. Now, the other issue about the students is that most of them come from countries where the teacher told them everything, never asked them a question, and they just got on. So they've come from environments where it's teacher-centered. That's the background. Now we coming along, and I'm very guilty of this, trying to push a student-centered approach. So we need to really think about what is the best approach to teaching. Should it be a student-centered approach or a teacher-centered approach? So my thinking here is that we need to maybe start with a more teacher-centered approach, and as the students gain confidence in the language and their understanding, that they will become more confident and you could move towards a student-centered approach. Now, I've been thinking that quite a few staff still talking about the low attendance of tutorials, workshops, and maybe the students are scared to come because they know they're going to be asked a question. And they don't want to be embarrassed that they don't understand the question or they're not sure what's going on. So maybe they come to the lectures, but they don't want to come to the other sessions because they're afraid they're going to be asked a question. So I think that's something we need to think about. But one of the very interesting, I came across a few staff using this new software. I didn't know about it, but it's really interesting. The feedback Mentimeter. I'm not too sure how many of you have used it. Is there anyone who's used it? Can you just give an indication if you have used this software?
Hello, Simon. Yes, we actually have the license as well.
Okay, so has it been quite popular? Is it working out quite well?
Yes.
So if staff, so that is something I would encourage staff to use, because then it avoids those students have to actually give physical language feedback. So I think if you use the software, I went and had a look at it, and it's really interesting. So it really creates an interactive environment, but at the same time, the students don't have to actually speak, because all the polls come up. There might be something that worthwhile that we should consider. What's going on with this software. So this seems to have been quite useful. The staff member says, I wasn't sure if it would work well, but the software turned out to be very easy to use, and the students responded to all the questions. This was a successful activity, and I'll use it in future again. So this was used in an actual lecture. So I think this is a very important development. They all have the phones. Only some staff did indicate that they got distracted and started doing other stuff on their phones once the polls were over. So that's a challenge. You need to speak to the students about how to maybe block out that time to work on the poll, and then when it's finished, put their phones away. So some of them did say that students started doing other stuff on their phones once the polls are finished. So this was very, very interesting about the culture of reading. I found this, well, let me just jump to the next slide. I've lost one slide. One slide's disappeared. Anyway, but the culture of reading. Many of us do not have a practice of reading, as we have manual type jobs and cannot afford to buy books. So if you look at the socioeconomic group that you have, they come from a low socioeconomic group, and many of them are working, and the type of work they're doing is mainly manual work, working in hotels, working as receptionists, carrying stuff. So that's one of the challenges. But they don't come from a culture of reading. Now, when you look at the ebook statistics, and you look at what students, how many minutes they spend on the ebook. Now, I know most of the stats they spend like 3 minutes, 5 minutes, so there's not a lot of engagement, long-term engagement with the books. So maybe this comes back to this culture of reading. So one of the things that came through very strongly from the students is that many of the assignments require us to read articles of maybe 30, 40 pages, which is beyond us when we read very slowly. So they found it very difficult to get through reading all the assignments or readings that they have to do, because they're reading very slowly. So how can we speed up reading? I've done speed reading courses which increased my speed reading by 20 times. I was always a very slow reader, and then I did a speed reading course, and it increased my reading abilities, especially with exercise of the eyes, doing different activities. So I'm not sure if that's something we need to think about in terms of trying to speed up their reading ability. The other thing I asked about, can assignments be broken down more into manageable parts and readings that are shorter and manageable? So what they're asking is, can you not give them the readings that they need for the assignment and just say, go read everything and find the information that you need? So that's something they really ask, because they really struggle to go and find the information that they need and the relevant material, because of that lack of context, that they're not familiar with different types of approaches. I think we need to spend more time on trying to find academic articles. And one of them actually asked, can we not have more integrated English in the class. In other words, we've got Study Plus, so that's very good. But can we not have English built in as a subject in the degrees? So you actually doing more and more English to try and speed up their ability. So that's just the feedback from the students. But if you could give the specific readings for the assignment as you struggle with researching and find an appropriate academic material. And I think that's why we find them problems with referencing, where they've just been tending to cut and paste stuff and just blob it into the assignment instead of researching it. So that's about the culture of reading. Any comments on this, about the culture of reading? Do you feel the students have got a culture of reading? How can we get them to read more? I think Tom is doing something phenomenal. He has a reading group and he gets students together to read loud. So he has a reading group in which students come and have a book and they read out. And this reading group, he said, has had phenomenal impact on the students' confidence and on the students' ability to engage more with the work. So I think we really need to think about Tom's reading groups, and maybe in our workshops or seminars we actually introduce reading groups and get the students to read out aloud and work in a group, because that would definitely improve their ability to engage with the material. So if you look at Vygotsky's theory of learning, he talks about that learning is a verbal engagement. The more we engage verbally, the more we're going to learn. So I really think we need to get Tom to kind of give a session on how he runs this reading group and how we can engage in it. The other thing is that about the reading is that can't we make it part of our assessment. All our assessment at the moment is summative. We do not have any formative assessment. So I'm really thinking that we need to maybe have 10% of our, or 15% of the mark to do some reading activity and then give the students a mark. Because you'll be there, you can watch them, you can interact with them and evaluate their reading abilities, discussion in class. So I think that will improve the attendance of classes if we have some form of formative assessment. Some comments. So we've got some interesting feedback on this. So I think if we can try and encourage reading groups and oh my goodness, okay. So we've got the culture of reading. Many risks that may not lead to it. Okay. So in conclusion of this session, I don't want to speak forever and ever, amen, but we need to engage more with Study Plus on how to accelerate the language skills. So maybe they need to have classes every day. I don't know about the languages. I think the general speaking of English is fine, but I think the challenge comes in with the specialized wording and knowledge that we need for different subjects. So I think as Joe's given some really some interesting comments. lecturers need to take cognizance of the assignment suggestions from students. So please think about the assignments from a student's perspective. Staff need to engage with the software for polls. And I think we need to give more thought to a teacher versus student-centered approach. What do students prefer? Have you asked the students, do you want me to ask you questions? Or do you prefer me not to ask you questions? Have any of you ever asked the students whether you want them to ask them questions? Have you ever asked them that question? Or are you assuming that they want you to ask them questions? I don't have any feedback here. How are you doing what you want, but not thinking about what the students want? Any feedback on that? So how many of you are using the teacher developing independent learning? Okay, so Joe's put an interesting question there about moving away from passive learning. Yes, we'd rather move away from passive learning, but we need to get the confidence levels up so that they feel confident about that. And I think the software that we have where we get them to do the poll will help. So I think there's a balance, but I think we need to just be aware of what the students prefer and how they would like us to do it. Do we ask? Because what I've noticed, so some people prefer the passive learning sometimes, working in maybe twos, working together, maybe asking 2 people at a time a question, working in much smaller groups. So instead of asking everyone in the class, if there's about 20 or 30 people, make it more smaller, maybe just have groups of 2, and then you to have a discussion, intimate discussion with the group of 2 rather than of the whole class. So someone saying asking questions important to check understanding. I agree with that, but maybe we need to do that in very small groups, maybe 1 or 2 in a group, or use that software. But asking questions to a whole lot of people, then I'm very guilty of that. I will point at someone and say, Johnny, tell me, what do you think? And then the person's squirming, and I'm not realizing that they're squirming in the seat because I don't want to answer the question. So we need to be more sensitive towards the students in terms of our understanding. And I think this software that we have might help to overcome that problem, so it gives them more confidence. So that's what I have for today. So that was very interesting feedback from all the staff. The staff really benefiting from the peer observation. So Joe said peer sharing, turn into a partner and discuss. I've noticed in the accounting, especially in the accounting classes, they work mainly in twos, and they have their questions and work together, answering and working through questions together. So if there are any other points you want to raise before we end the session? I've made it short and sweet because I know you've just had a previous session of 2 hours on the software for the ebooks. Are there any other questions you want to ask or discuss? You're all very quiet. You come to the end of the academic year, you pooped. Anything else? Okay, let's just go through. Okay, so Tony attempts share pairing. So we've had some students prefer It's a question about the extra English input requested by students. So, so they asked Melanie if it could be more on get into case studies to understand the English context. It's a lot of students don't understand the English ways. Maybe we could do more newspaper articles, sort of current news, and going through those articles just to try and get them to understand what's happening in English society. They did ask about, so it's mainly about the context of the English, not so much on the grammar and that, but more on the context of the English society. So I think that could work quite well. So taking an experiential approach and using that to work through. Someone suggested now we have online lectures which you record, and then the students can go over them afterwards, pause, reflect. One of the other things that came through in the peer observation was if you show a video, just break the video up into short sections and then ask a question or have a pause and show the whole video for half an hour, 40 minutes, but have short sessions of the video. Any other questions? So thanks very much for your attention. It's been a good participation today. And I just want you to reflect on your peer learning and how we can go forward for the next year. So picking up on those points about the software, maybe on recorded online lectures, and the reading groups, trying to get the reading groups going. So if you're doing law, maybe you do read through case studies of law and then explain it as you go on, etc. Okay, totsiens everyone, and goodbye, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks.